Okay, good morning and welcome back to part 2 of our MN204 week 5 lecture. So this is replacing the lectures that were cancelled because of the extreme weather event in Maynooth. And now what we're going to talk about over the next 15 minutes is the process for managing data. So we explained how data in itself is meaningless. It's only when we actually perform some kind of aggregation or inquiry of it that we develop information that has some sort of use. So we're going to talk through that process for managing data now. Okay, so, first thing we realize is that there's multiple sources of data. It can come from within the organization, our databases. It can come from personal sources, so people's thoughts and opinions, people's experiences. It can come from external sources like commercial databases, government reports, census data, corporate websites. So there's huge numbers of, if you see the images down here, there's a lot of transactional data, things like credit card swipes, RFIDs, digital video surveillance, or radiology scans. So what you see is a mix of different types of data, some of which is extremely private and confidential, some of it's publicly available like a blog. So what is the issue is that this data is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's more and more of it all the time. It's also scattered across ways, so it needs to be collected by different individuals with different methods and devices. So it means it's really messy. It comes from different sources, so it's going to have a different structure. So there may be issues around security, around the quality of the data and the integrity. So, we talked before about privacy and security. So these issues, the more data we have about customers, the bigger risk to the issue. And it's really important that the data has integrity, that it's actually valid, that it's correct, that, we have the right information about people. We can't, if we're a government agency and we have information about people's criminal records or whatever, that has to be up to date. So one of the other things we have to watch out for is data rot or data degradation. So, I've lived at some 20 different addresses since I moved out from my parents' house over the last 25 years. So lots of different databases might have the incorrect address for me. They might have an old email address, so they're trying to contact me and they can't get in touch with me because the phone number is out of date. So it's really important that we keep our data up to date. But the real fundamental problem is this ever exponentially increasing deluge of data that needs to be taken into account when making decisions. And if we have more data than we can handle, we often end up with paralysis by analysis. So we need to have a strategy for managing the data. So the first thing is we need, data governance. So approach to managing the information across the entire organization. So we start off with, what is master data? So what's the core data, such as customer ID, student number, employee number, geographic location, and this will span the enterprise. So across all the information systems. So when we're talking about, Roger speaking about payroll and accounting, and student records, and, different people know that it's the same person that they're talking about. So we have a process then to manage that data. So we have to be able to store and exchange and synchronize what we're calling a single version of the truth for the company's master data. So we have a process for the life cycle. The data comes in from a particular source. It could be internal, external, or personal data. It goes into a warehouse where it's stored. We assign metadata to it, so that's information about it. So, when was the data gathered? Who does it relate to? What format is it in? So we can pull that out into data marts, which are kind of like slimmed down versions of warehouses, and perform an online analytical processing. So we actually dynamically mine or analyze the data. And as a result of it, we get some kind of visualization, we get guidance on decisions. So we suddenly discover, having analyzed our data, that people hate one of our products, but we're forcing them to buy it because, it's the one we're putting all the effort into. So we make a decision that this product is not popular with the customers. We're better off getting rid of it before it results in us losing customers. And then we have to actually, we have to manage the knowledge. We have to share it among the organization and share it. So this will actually affect, the day-to-day functional activities of the organization, our supply chain management, our customer relation management, our e-commerce. All our strategy is underpinned by decisions that's coming from data. And ideally, we will make informed, data-driven decisions. Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about in week 5 is big data. So big data is a big buzzword, and it's really important. People talk about it, the new natural resource, like data is more important than oil, all these dramatic things, that we don't need theory anymore, we just need data and we can make decisions. But the reality is, data analysis, yes, it's all socio-technical. It's all about asking the right questions. It's about understanding the relationship between data and the business. But if we don't understand what the business is, the data isn't any use to us. So we're going to talk a little bit about big data now and explain what it is. It's fast growing, so it's 60% per annum, which is massive. So social media, every minute there's 600 blog posts. I think it's now 60,000 tweets a minute. Zettabytes of data going up huge amounts. So it's kind of, quadrupling over a couple of years. So it's exponential, bigger and bigger. So people are constantly generating data. Every time, we move from one mobile phone cell area to another, every time we go from one Wi-Fi point to another, every time we log onto the internet, every time we do a web search, every time our car goes past a traffic light sensor, every time we go through a toll barrier, every time we go past CCTV, it's generating data. And this data is not just humans, but it's also machine to machine. So in 2010, there was 35 billion devices connected to the internet. So that's 7 devices for every person on the planet. That's expected to have trebled by 2020. And all these devices are going to be talking to each other. So if you think of the Internet of Things, all these devices are talking to each other. And every time they talk to each other, they're producing data. An autonomous vehicle might produce terabytes of data in a day. And all that has to be analysed to see if we can improve the performance of the vehicle. So we've got traditional enterprise data, machine-generated sensor data. So if we've got, traffic lights or an assembly line process that's generating data, we've got social data. So all the blogs and tweets and Instagram, Snapchats, shares are all producing vast quantities of data. And then the billions and billions of devices located around the world, digital cameras, smartphones, medical scanners, CCTV. So that kind of gives us an idea of what it is. So if you want to capture what big data is, and you want one takeaway from section 2 of this, it's the 4 V's: volume, velocity, variety, and veracity or value. And we're going to talk through those 4 V's, but it's really important that you know what those 4 V's are, because it gives you an idea of a framework to think about big data. So the volume, more and more and more of it. So the amount of data created by mankind from the start of time till 2003 is now created every 2 days. It's 2.5 quintillion bytes per day, and that's lots. So it creates massive challenges for storage. So a single human genome is 4 terabytes. Put that in context, when I started working in marine surveying, we surveyed an area of the Irish seabed 10 times the size of the landmass of Ireland, and it was about 1 terabyte of data. So we knew the depth of the entire seabed, its magnetic characteristics, all sorts of information, and it was 1 terabyte. A single genome has 4 terabytes of data in it, and we want to analyse those genomes to identify patterns. So, if there's 12 terabytes of tweets created each day, how do we know what sentiment analysis of what the sentiment of people feeling about our brand is? If we're Starbucks, and people are tweeting, what are they saying about our coffee? What about the 350 billion annual meter readings? What does that tell us about how power is used? If we want to switch to a renewable energy grid with wind power, at what time of the day are we at risk of running out of electricity? When do we need to bring backup electricity generation online? So, we can take all this massive amounts of information and develop insights. We can spot trends that indicate that there's illegal connections or fraud or whatever. So it's huge amounts of this data. It's a big challenge, but the thing to remember about this is there's lots of it. So then the next thing is variety. So there's just, different types of data: traditional computer data, email, videos, audio, stock market data, electricity, financial transaction, sensor data, tons and tons and tons of it. So what are we doing? We're trying to look at hundreds of live video feeds for surveillance, looking for, to see if there's something we should be worried about. 80% growth in images, video, and documents. And how do we actually exploit that to improve customer satisfaction? And velocity. How fast is it being produced? How fast must we process it to meet some kind of demand? What's the point of knowing next week what people were feeling about something yesterday? if we were doing data analysis, if Joe Schmidt's got, a data analysis thing, that's telling him, how many kilometers or how many meters people have ran, there's no point analysing it after the match if the player has actually ran to their physical limits of their endurance. You need to actually have that analysis dynamically, so you can make a substitution before a player becomes too tired to perform. So, look at it, 5 million trade events every day for something like a Visa card. You have to kind of identify trends in that would indicate fraud. So, if there's an unusual purchase on your credit card, you might get a text message asking them to confirm that it's actually you. So, 5 million daily call detail records to predict customer churn faster. So, we're looking at phone conversations with a company or something to identify, what are the predictors that indicate somebody's about to leave our company. So, then the next one is veracity. The fourth V, or the value. So if the information has to be valid before we can do it. So 30% of managers don't trust the data that they're presented to make decisions. So if we're using big data that's coming from huge data sources, it's got a much higher value. It's more likely to be correct. So one of the big challenges with data is it needs to be representative of what we're examining. But we need to understand the relationship between it. So George Wallace was the governor in Alabama, famous in the Lynyrd Skynyrd song "Sweet Home Alabama," and he was a segregationist. He was a racist, anti-civil rights campaigner. But what they discovered was, looking at the analysis, that the biggest predictor of his vote was the percentage of African Americans in an electoral area, which is counterintuitive. But so we need to actually understand the relationship between cause and effect in our data to make valuable stuff. The challenge with things like opinion polls and representative samples are, for example, one of the first opinion polls that was conducted in America sampled 3 million people. So when MRBI do a poll in Ireland, they sample 1,000 people, and they'll say they'll be right within 4%. So this one in America sampled 3 million people, and they got it completely wrong. And the reason why they got it completely wrong was the opinion poll was sent out with a mail order catalogue for seed. So the only people who responded to the survey were actually farmers, and the farmers were more likely to vote for one party than the other. It wasn't a representative sample. So the idea is that, we want to be able to trust the information we get. So, it has to be, for it to have any value, it has to be true. So examples of big data in the retail sector, this is kind of a funny and humorous one, was that when Walmart analysed their loyalty card information, they discovered there was a correlation between people buying nappies and beer. And the reality is, once you've got a kid, you don't get to go out. So you fancy a beer in the evening, you can't go to the pub. So what they actually did to act on this, and I don't think it's particularly ethical, they put the beer on wheels, and at 8 o'clock in the evening, they wheeled it over beside the nappies. Another example of big data is this company, CardioDX, analysing 100 million genes samples, and they identified 23 primary predictive genes for coronary artery disease. What's maybe a more famous example is the BRCA2 gene, which indicates somebody's predisposition for breast cancer. So the Hollywood actress and producer Angelina Jolie has the BRCA2 gene mutation. So as a result, she had a high likelihood of developing breast cancer. So as a result, she had an elective mastectomy, which means that she's less likely to develop breast cancer. So this is something that's done from predictive gene analysis. So another one is Google Flu research. So at the bottom, there's a tiny little graph at the bottom of the screen, and you can see blue and red lines, and one is Google searches and the other is people presenting at A&E. And what you can actually see is that the Google search actually peaks before people present at A&E, so we can use people's searches on Google to predict an epidemic of A&E. And if we had a really agile health system, we'd be able to get more staff into the A&E in advance in order to ensure that the waiting list didn't go up. So then we have things like cab spotting, crime spotting, mobile phone location. So the last time I was in the traffic jam, Google was actually able to tell me I was in the traffic jam because there was lots of mobile phones on a road where there shouldn't have been. Okay, so I'm just gonna hit stop here, and we're gonna come back with part 3 in the next section. It's really important that you